Hello, everyone. Oh, it's very different up here to being in the audience. Hi. So I'm Poppy Nobes. I'm the Head of Professional Development at Aldridge Education. And coaching is something that as an organisation, we are really passionate about, and it is at the core of our approach to professional development. I'm going to ask you a bit of a strange question to start with, though, which might seem strange, but I am going to then connect back to the topic of my conversation. Um, I always love a metaphor as an English teacher, so I love starting my training with a metaphor. So, in this audience here, who has ever owned an iPod? I've owned an iPod. Yeah, I've owned an iPod. Great, okay. Who in the audience has ever owned a Microsoft Zune? Oh, a Zune, Z-U-N-E. Interesting. This is a Microsoft Zune. Microsoft Zune was released in 2006 as a direct competitor to the iPod. It was cheaper, it had a built-in radio, it had loads of things that should have been going for it, yet it failed. The iPod is still what we know as something that was a successful music device. And I think it's really interesting when we look at implementation of something which was a great idea in theory, but it fizzled out. And by 2012, it was withdrawn from the market. That's why you've not heard of the Microsoft Zune. And it's really interesting because this makes me think about education. And I wonder how many of you have ever had a really good idea in school that's been launched with a bang. There's been an amazing launch, some intro training, everyone's really excited about it. And then over time, other priorities come to the fore, and actually it fizzles out into nothing. And you think, oh my goodness, what happened to that thing that we were trying to implement? We've totally forgotten about that. And I'm really going to talk about the EEF implementation guide a lot today, because they say that ultimately it doesn't matter how great an educational idea or intervention is in principle. What really matters is how it manifests itself in the day-to-day work of people in schools. You can have a great idea, but if it is not embedded in your day-to-day work in schools, it is going to fizzle out and it is going to fail. Now, this is something that we really think about really keenly when we are thinking about our coaching program. So just to give you a little bit of background on our coaching program, it was actually introduced by our current CEO in 2019. So we've been using instructional coaching for quite a while now. It's very in vogue in UK education, but I like to think we were kind of there at the forefront. And we use this structure here, See It, Name It, Do It, and that is inspired by Paul Bambrick-Santoyo and his book Get Better Faster. And actually, I'm going to talk today about how it's not the model, it's not the process, it's not the structure that's the important thing here, it's how you execute it. We know that Dr. Sam Sims has said that actually instructional coaching is our best bet form of evidence-informed CPD, has an impact on student outcomes. And so we were really determined for this to work, and we started using See It, Name It, Do It. And then in 2021, aided by lovely friend Sarah over here, we had the EEF mechanisms come to the fore, and we felt a little bit of vindication actually, because lots of the things that they were saying in the mechanisms were actually things that we've been using in our instructional coaching, really emphasizing. So things like revisiting prior learning. Okay, we always start with a See the Success, where we talk about their action step that they had last week and how it's gone in their classroom. Great, we do that. Also thinking about setting and agreeing on goals. Great, well, we have a name it. We always have an action step. Brilliant. We're doing that, tick, tick. We have our do it and modeling the technique, rehearsing the technique, feedback. Brilliant. We are ticking all of these mechanisms. Fantastic. We're doing a really good job. The thing is, though, you can have a structure and on the surface, it looks like it's ticking all the boxes and like you're doing a really good job of implementation. But actually, is that enough? It's not enough. And I think that this diagram, I love the new revised EEF implementation report and this more complex structure around the 4-step process of implementation. Because actually, when we talk about sustaining something, we are not going to be able to sustain implementing something or embedding it in everyday practice if we don't have time to reflect, monitor, and adapt to improve implementation. And we weren't doing that. We had this model, we were hoping that people were following it, and then we were hoping that it had impact. So we held time for coaching. Isn't that enough? So we actually, in many of our schools, we had time built into the timetable where it was, oh, okay, this is your time to coach every week. So we had our classroom teachers, we had our coaches. But then there's several questions around this, because just because you're holding the time doesn't mean it's being used well. So how do we know the right action steps are being set? Because actually, quite a lot of the time, it's based on the opinion of one person. How do we know that that's the right thing to move practice forward? A really big question for us is actually, do the coaches know about the mechanisms? Do they follow the structure because they're told to, or because they know why each element works, and they know which bit of the model to use at the right time? And is there actually an impact on classroom practice? So it can be really easy to hold the time and then just leave coaches to it and assume that they're doing a really good job. Whereas actually, it's linking back to what Sarah was saying about the right thing at the right time for the right reason. Because we talk about teachers needing adaptive expertise, but equally, coaches need adaptive expertise. They need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And so we introduced a new layer in order to support our coaches. Coaches for the coaches. And I know you might say to me, oh, well, where does it end? Do you then need coaches for the coaches, for the coaches, for the coaches, for the coaches? And actually, it is the power of this third layer where we help our coaches be better for our teachers by coaching the coaches, that actually we are improving the quality of what is happening in that held time. It's interesting that in that learn model we have at the end about nurturing improvement, because I actually think that's what our coaches for the coaches layer does. It is about nurturing the improvement of coaches and helping them have more impact on the teachers. So we were like, okay, brilliant. We're going to have coaches for coaches. Fantastic. Right, we're going to do loads of things to help our coaches improve their practice and be really adaptive and have great mental models about coaching and be really brilliant coaches. So we had an initial training input. We had half-termly network meetings for coaches where we are refreshing their skills, we're showing them models, we're practicing coaching. We have a program called the Masterful Classroom, where all of our coaches who are really elite coaches, they are taken through a process of tracking the journey of their impact on coaching and data in the classroom and their impact on actually the development of curriculum and teaching. We have also really worked on our development of our professional development leads in schools. So actually, we need to get to a point where we're not the ones, as a central team, my Growing Together team, we aren't the ones who are saying, oh, your coaching is, yeah, fine, it's very adaptive, it's having great impact, or it's not. We wanted to empower leaders to be able to do that for themselves. So we introduced our facilitator scope and sequence. So this is a rubric, and we've read a lot of different evidence, and we've looked at what makes good facilitation of PD, what makes good coaching, and we have put it in this rubric, and I've brought some today if any of you want to have a look afterwards. And so we are helping our leaders give better feedback on feedback. And that was really important for us. Thing is, okay, we're doing all this stuff as a central function, but there's still something missing, because we have some really unique barriers as a trust that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. Something was still missing, and that something turned out to be Iris Connect. But before I talk about what our challenges were and how Iris Connect has helped us, I'd love you to just have a conversation on your table to think about, what is something that you've implemented? Perhaps it is coaching. And what are the barriers that you are coming across as your school or trust? What are those things that are standing in your way of embedding that as really good practice at the moment? Just name some of those things on your table. Take 30 seconds. Off you go. Okay, let's come back together. And oh, I didn't do the pre-warn thing that Sarah did very well earlier, where she said she was going to cold call. So, but I'd love to hear a few different ideas about barriers that you're finding to implementation. Let's hear from this table, first of all, a barrier.
The issue, obviously, which is the easiest one, which is time, which everyone will probably say is one of the first major. But I think Iris helps with that because the nature of how Iris works can make a huge benefit in terms of time. The other thing that Iris does kind of help, maybe could even further develop, is the use of research to back up your implementation process and the summarising of that research to allow teachers easy access to that summary, that research.
It's really interesting, thank you. And I always ask about barriers to implementation in various different training sessions, and time is always number one that people say. And yeah, spoiler, but yeah, I'm going to talk about how Iris has helped us with that, so thank you for that. Let's take from the back table.
Yeah, so I've just joined a new group, so I'm full of new ideas and stuff like that.
Love that.
My leadership team is 13 people, so it's just a lot of people to get to say yes before you can get to move anything forward, it feels like. So a lot of hoops to jump through.
So even deciding what you're going to implement can be a barrier. Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's take one more, back left table.
I think what I said was that kind of barrier to change. And that belief that you were doing things right in the first place, so why do I need to change?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you. So it's interesting to hear where the crossovers are with the barriers that we were facing, because I feel like by this stage of our implementation, we'd done the research, we had our facilitator scope and sequence, and we'd set out our stall of exactly what we wanted our facilitation, our coaching to look like. We had lots of training opportunities in place, lots of really enthusiastic coaches coming for that support. But there were three key barriers that, when we're talking about scaling across a group of schools, really reared their head. So I wanted to show you this map of our trust so that you can understand that we're a medium-sized trust. But look how far across the country we are spread. So actually, I'm going to talk about time in just a moment, but our biggest barrier to successful implementation and scaling and networking is our geography. We go all the way from, we have Packer and Backer and Aldridge Adult Learning here in Brighton, all the way up to Darwen with Blackburn. We've got a new school joining in Warrington. Unless I am on a train 24/7, how are we supposed to support coaches on the ground to develop their expertise? That was a barrier for us. Different types of settings. You'll see that here in Brighton, we've got Aldridge Adult Learning. We have secondaries, we have primary, we have a UTC, we have a studio school. So these are very different settings with very different needs, and also very different sizes of staff bodies, going all the way from a one-form entry primary school all the way through to a secondary school with 2,000 students. So obviously that support and what that's going to look like on the ground needs to look totally different. So those were our challenges. And actually, enter Iris Connect to help us really think about how are we going to support coaches in all these different places. So I think what's really, really advantageous about Iris Connect is that you can obviously set it up in any classroom at any time in order to capture video footage. And that's obviously its basic function, but it's then what you do with that and the reflection that you have on that process that makes it so powerful. So these are just a few things that we do with the technology. So we want to model in our coaching sessions. So we are trying to capture best practice examples. And I've put of teaching, but actually that's a bit reductive because we don't just capture best practice examples of teaching. We film training sessions, we film one-to-one coaching sessions, we film co-planning meetings. We are constantly capturing examples of teaching and of leading those kind of development for staff in order to find those best practice examples. It's really powerful for our ECTs and our trainees. We watch them teach way more frequently, and we are able to do that with a push of a button and help their reflection. We also film and quality assure our mentoring sessions because we have all of this time held to develop our ECTs, but actually we want to make sure that that time is quality. So again, we are filming coaching, we're filming mentoring. This one is really, really important. We use our facilitator scope and sequence rubric in order to coach our coaches and our leaders of professional development. So if you look at my personal iris, I have far fewer clips of actual teaching and just tons of coaching sessions, ranging from a coach who is a classroom teacher through to principals who film themselves coaching. Like, we all want to be expert coaches, and there's no hierarchy in this. It's about developing our mental models and our professionalism as an expert coach. Also, Iris is great for hosting groups, discussion boards, and that kind of thing to really help break down our geographical barrier and really bring people together. So I'm just going to show you a few screenshots of, and our reflective pathways that I'm going to show you in just a moment. So I'm going to show you a few screenshots of things that we do on the Iris platform that have helped break down geographical barriers. They've helped take away that idea of, I don't have time to coach my coaches, because Iris really helps with that. So we capture different activities, not just lessons. So this is a science lesson at the UTC, and these slides, as you know, will be shared afterwards. So sorry if you can't see what's written, but you can see that dialogue down the side on the teacher's lesson. But then this is a one-to-one coaching session, exactly the same thing. This is a training briefing that has happened, and exactly the same thing with the comments down the sides. It's really, really powerful to film lots of different things, and actually, if you all have a shared idea of what quality looks like, then you can be having that dialogue. We also use groups. So this first group is just one coach and their coachee filming their coaching and the teaching over time. So the coachee in this example, Jack, I could watch his lesson from the beginning of coaching, and I could watch his lesson from the end. And hopefully I'm seeing a difference. I'm seeing that that coach has had an impact on his classroom practice. And the groups really help us gather together that evidence and track someone's progress over time. But then equally, this group has, from last year, had all of our coaching leads in it from across schools, and they were sharing videos of their coaches and then commenting on each other's practice. And so what a nice flexible way of using that group functionality to bring leads and people together from across the trust. Anna has just done a really nice piece of work with us, building some reflective custom pathways, because we have a really specific approach to coaching. We really wanted the pathways to reflect what we want to do as a trust and not just be generic. So our reflective pathway, and Hailey was talking earlier about actually setting aside time for reflection. So we have 2 different reflective models for staff to choose from: the Driscoll one, which I prefer because it's nice and simple, or the Gibbs one, and they select a reflection. It doesn't have to be teaching. It can be teaching. It can be a coach reflecting on their coaching. They select that reflection that they're reflecting on, and then they follow that process. And it just structures that reflection time in a really productive way. We also have one pathway, which is about the interaction between a coach and a coachee. And it was really hard to get a screenshot that shows the power of this. But essentially, each different tab is a different part of the coaching process, and really it directs them towards different theory, and then they have the action step and they discuss that, and then they move on to looking at a model, and it's really nicely structured, trying to really align with the mechanisms. And there's also a coach development workspace where if they are thinking about, oh, I want to coach on this particular thing, this can structure their planning of the session if they are new to coaching and they need support with their mental models. So it's really amazing how flexible the Iris platform is. And I think it's those who just say, oh, it is a way of filming. It's really reductive to actually all of these extra benefits of the platform that have really helped us connect across a geographical distance. And what are our lessons learned? Well, implementation is a process, not an event. I mean, I said that we launched instructional coaching in 2019, and I would not say we are perfect at it. We all have really strong mental models and we're brilliant every single day. Absolutely not. We are still on that journey and we're learning together, and I think that's really important. I think that structure and having See It, Know It, Do It was really important to get people doing the right thing at the beginning. But now we're increasingly wanting to think about adaptive expertise as coaches. And do you need to do it in that order if actually your coachee needs something different? And that's really, we're moving more towards a nuanced approach to coaching. So it was really nice to hear Sarah's talk earlier that we absolutely reflected what we're thinking about and working on. So once the foundations are in place, let's support adaptive practice that's the right thing at the right time, not just because we're following a certain structure. I think when we first started training coaches, we didn't emphasize the why enough. So you're following this model and it's going to work. Off you go. Okay, you're following this model and it's going to work because of the mechanisms and because of the research and because of the bigger picture. And we are much more expert at that now. And I think we're passing that on to our new generation of coaches. We also think that actually when we moved up a layer and my team weren't giving feedback to teachers anymore, that's for the coaches on a school level to do, we're giving feedback on the feedback. All of a sudden the conversation changed and actually our coaches are getting much better and it's having a much better impact on teaching. And we couldn't have done it without Iris Connect really bringing us together. So I think that was really, really important. Schools are also becoming much less reliant on my team because they have the specialisms and the expertise in-house. And isn't that what we want in a trust? We want schools to be able to thrive in their own contexts. Oh, so I don't want you to just take my word for it. I essentially emailed some colleagues and I said, please can you write me 1 to 2 sentences about why you really value Iris? And they all sent me back an essay. So I've got the essay on the slides and I think you'll read, yeah, you'll read the whole thing when it's sent out, but I've highlighted some key phrases. So firstly, I asked Diane Hayes, she is the coaching lead and the assistant principal for teaching and learning at Darwen Vale High School. And I just highlighted these things here about what a valuable tool it is. It saved her time. She can give targeted feedback. And what we talked about, we want to monitor practice. We want the coaching on coaching to become part and parcel of what we're doing. Dawn Barlow Ward is a school improvement partner in the North. Iris makes my role manageable. I just think that's amazing. Real-time feedback. Teachers are increasing in confidence. She was particularly reflecting on our 1-4 entry primary school. They really struggle to find time for PD because there are hardly any of them doing so much work. But their ability to actually have those conversations on videos on the platform, they're increasing in confidence, filming themselves, responding to that feedback. And she can model practice remotely and not have to be on the ground all the time as well. The leader of our SCITT, again, wrote me an essay. Iris is invaluable. Loved this about holistic picture of trainee progress. It's like what I was talking about earlier with that group where I had Lucy and Jack, the beginning of their coaching relationship and all the way through to the end. She's able to see a holistic picture of progress over time and capture that really tangibly. And she really wants to hold time for reflection. She feels that if you start reflecting early in your career, it becomes a habit, and actually you're more likely to do that later in your career. And finally, our ECF lead, again, talked about it being a powerful tool. And I think my favorite comment from Ted was about reflecting in a safe and a low stakes environment. It can feel high stakes to film yourself, but actually the way that we have the culture around filming yourself, it actually means that it's shared between you and the coach. And it is more low stakes than it could otherwise seem. It's a valuable tool for growth, and our work is more efficient and productive. I liked that a lot. So don't just take my word for it. My colleagues really value this. It's making a really big impact on the way that we give feedback on feedback and actually having an impact on our group of schools and really acknowledging their differences, but also the differences that make them really successful when it comes to coaching their own teachers in their own environment. So I don't know how much time I have left. Oh my goodness, I've got 1 minute for any questions, but I'll be around later as well, I have copies of the facilitator scope and sequence if you'd like to have a flick through and see what we're working with. But if there are any questions, yes, go for it. Thanks.
Just to go back to the colleague but mindset really. What do you think was the key lever that you used to ensure that the culture was right, in the sense of not people thinking it was like a Big Brother style introduction rather than a really valuable self-development tool?
Oh, for Iris?
Yeah.
Oh, so we had a lot of help from lovely colleagues in the room, actually. People like Anna, people like Vesna, who really helped us get the launch right and emphasising all of the aspects of the platform that keep your videos really private, and the fact that you're only sharing your practice with the people that you choose to share it with. And I think that it was really important that we had support from the professionals who'd launched it in thousands of schools before. But then also in a lot of our schools, we started with a really small group of staff. And it was really interesting. So one of our schools, Darwen Aldridge Community Academy, massive school up in Darwen. And we were like, oh, they're going to be really funny about this. So let's only start with a small group of staff. And then all of a sudden they're like, what are you doing? You're filming your own lesson. I want an account. Oh my goodness. And we were surprised but heartened, actually. When you made it really exclusive, people really wanted to try it out. So yeah, that was a strategy as well. Yes.
I think we're all agreed that evidence base is absolutely crucial.
Mm-hmm.
But an evidence base is only as strong as the reliable as the strength of the quality of the research.
Mm.
So I think it's probably a general question to you and to Lawrence. What's the criteria for choosing research and its provenance? Because it's one thing to quote editors of the paper, but it's another thing to know what the quality of that research actually is.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question. And actually, I think that the EEF is a really good standard for research, and actually what comes out of that organisation, I trust that it's coming from a really good place. But then there are also multiple other sources, like on the EEF website, where they have the different trials and things with the different padlocks and showing the strength of that research. I think it's really important to look into that. And the thing is, on a school level, people don't have time to be critiquing research and thinking, is this the right research? So actually, I do think that's the benefit of having a professional development team. So we do a lot of is this the right research? Is this actually, was this trial carried out under the right conditions, etc.? And we have a journal club, and we do a lot of that thinking, so that by the time it gets to schools, it's like, we've done all the due diligence. This is what we're going with. So I do accept that. And I think that there's some educational research that's taken as fact that isn't necessarily formed on the most solid foundations, but we do a lot of due diligence for that. And I know the Iris team will as well. And so, are you going to come in on that as well, Sarah? Yeah. Mm.
Because I think we have a bit of a culture of, if someone puts up evidence, that it is accepted without question. I agree with what you said about the EF. They're generally quite good at calling out where the strength of their evidence isn't quite there, which I like about them. They'll say, like, this was a efficacy trial, we have to go and do an effectiveness trial, etc.
That's really reassuring. Come from a medical background.
Yeah.
You're always very sceptical about research that's quoted by a drug company.
Yeah.
You would say that, wouldn't you?
Yes.
I think the
mechanisms research, what Sam and Harry, who were main instigators, did was they pre-registered the framework. So the framework they came up with from research, mainly behavioural science, but also cognitive science, and they pre-registered it. So they lived or died by this framework. So it could have been that all the studies, all the RCTs they looked at, showed that the framework was wrong. Luckily.
But I think probably coronavirus is actually ours has got a huge potential for an evidence base for all schools involved. Is that a role that you see?
Well, we're involved in research and evaluation quite a lot in the US in particular, and very recently, I think it was about 2 years ago now, wasn't it, Andy? We were involved in a real kind of gold standard trial looking at the sort of efficacy of video coaching with almost 1,000 teachers, so it was a huge trial. So we've got a long history at Iris Connect of being involved in kind of research and evaluation projects. it's interesting that you come from a medical background, because I think medicine has got this more right, I think, and teaching in some respects, because we've only been sort of an evidence-informed profession for a short amount of time compared to the medical world. And you have a model called 5 A's of evidence-based practice, which I have a lot of trainees at the University of Sunderland, and I teach my trainees and mentors to ask those 5 questions. You know, asking yourself, is this kind of a gold standard piece of research? Is it peer reviewed? Is it in a similar environment? So I think we're way behind, I think, the medical world, and then we're moving towards that kind of critical consumerism of research that we reviewed.
I think what's really hard as well is that what is the impact you're looking for? Is it GCSE results? But then you're not looking at the impact on wider school life. So then you come down to the question of, okay, so what is education for? And that makes it really hard, because in medicine, it's, did the patient get better? But then in teaching, it's, what is my impact? Is it that they got really good exam results, or is it something more? So I think we need to almost define that first. And that's what makes it so much more complex. Informed, yeah.
The key piece of research is the implementation guidance. Yes, the recognition that like it's never your context that begins something, and even if it was your context keeps changing. Yes. So implementation is always going to be.
But that's the skill of being a professional.
Yes.
Using the evidence base to the context that you're in, and that's very much the challenge in general practice.
Yeah. Is
that you had this evidence base, but you had to apply it to an individual sitting in front of you. It's the same for the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm aware I've probably gone over time now, but that was a really interesting question. Thank you. But I just wanted to give you the Growing Together email address at aldridgeeducation.org. And if you want to get in touch about anything that I've talked about today, please do. And I also have Catherine is here from Packer. So she's experienced all this. So please do ask what they're doing with coaching at Packer, because I'm sure she'd love to tell you. So thank you very, very much. And I hope that was useful to see what this can all look like in a real life context. So thank you, everyone.